Over the last almost 12 years now, I've had to travel back to Bulgaria to see Jock, probably for over 40 times. Jock has learnt to cope with the prison system. Every single day, Jock has had to fight for something. It might be food, it might be clothing, it might be for a privilege or against a punishment. And over that time, I've seen Jock grow into a stronger person.
An Australian man detained for 11 years in Bulgaria has been granted parole by a panel of judges.
When I woke up that morning and I actually saw that Jock had been released from prison and had been granted parole, it was a fantastic moment. It was a decision that could not be appealed. We even started planning how to bring him home and where he would stay.
Unfortunately, it did prove to be a short-lived feeling of relief, because it wasn't long after that that things really started to spiral again out of control. There were all the familiar problems that we'd experienced before with the justice system and being subject to interference by politicians and powerful people within Bulgaria.
The politics have taken over the legal system. And when we're sitting here in the Hunter Valley looking at the news coming in from all directions, it's not easy to get a clear idea of what's going on.
Jock Palfreeman is a master for some people. They don't understand what is the justice. Government are corrupted. All corrupted. So they have no interest for normal justice.
Chaos remains because I can't distinguish, nor can anyone, between the politics and the judicial system. The two are so mixed up that looking at it from this direction, very hard to know what the outcome might be.
A few days after Christmas 2007, Simon and I were having a family holiday and we received a phone call. And it's that phone call you hope that you never receive.
Jock was in trouble. He was in prison in Bulgaria. I got some very early information to suggest that he had actually gone to help somebody, that in the melee someone had been killed. Really, it was, no, this can't be right. Why would anybody be so silly to have a knife? My initial feeling was just to go in there as a parent and get him out of there as quickly as possible. I really had no idea what to expect. I mean, it might sound absurd, but I knew very little about Bulgaria except weightlifters and poison-tipped umbrellas. I arrived in a snow-clad city. I couldn't even read the language because it was in Cyrillic. I was fearful of my own safety. And I think my overwhelming sense was I'm out of my depth. Back in 2006, Jock had the opportunity to go to university but decided that wasn't really where he wanted to go. So he packed his backpack and he headed over to Europe to have his 2 years of travelling around and finding the world.
Jock was 19, found himself in Bulgaria and just seemed to kind of settle in somehow. He just seemed to fall in love with a country that I would never have guessed.
He developed close relationships to quite a few families there. Jock eventually had to go back to England where he joined the British Army, and it was from there that he went to that fateful Christmas holiday in Bulgaria. When I first went to see Jock, I didn't know the procedures. People couldn't explain to me what I was supposed to do. And eventually, Jock got shown into a room. I just let Jock talk, and he told me his story.
My friend convinced me that I should come to Sofia for the night. We all jumped in the car, and then I went back to get my ID, and next to the ID was a knife. I still feel scared to walk around Bulgaria, especially at night time. So I grabbed the knife and put it in my pocket. They're legal in Bulgaria.
As I understand it, they went out for a night on the town. They could hear some noise coming from the subway.
A group of football fans started walking up the street, maybe 20, even more, maybe 25, and they were all singing and chanting. People were walking past them and they were pushing them, and I saw two men on the ground being beaten. One of them got up and ran across the street.
Jock told me when he got closer that the boy was dark-skinned. He was obviously a gypsy. He knew straight away that what was happening and went in there to try and save him.
And then I started shouting in Bulgarian, "Go back, go back." That's when they started attacking me.
More of them started coming towards me, and I realized, shit, now I'm in some trouble here. So I reached into my right pocket and I pulled out the knife, opened it with two hands, and held it up in the air for everybody to see.
When I took out the knife, I thought that they would be scared into leaving me alone.
As I understand it, they all end up moving away from the boy on the ground. And then things started to get a bit serious for Jock.
I was constantly turning in a circle, and every time one would come to me, I would lunge at them with the knife in a swiping movement to scare them.
They picked up bits of pavement. They were throwing that at Jock.
The rocks were aimed at my head and I was blocking them. The next thing I remember, I'm on the ground and the police are there.
In first discussing what had happened with Jock, it became quite clear that the initiating event was Jock seeing a group of drunken young men attacking a pair of Roma boys, sometimes called gypsies, and that he went to their defence. And it was the subsequent melee that then ended up with the death of Andrei Monov. The story of the two Roma boys was never pursued by the police. They were never found. In fact, they were never actually sought for. And in fact, none of the boys that actually attacked Jock were also ever searched and arrested. It was only Jock who was arrested right from the beginning.
Are you guilty? Why did you kill the boy?
He was charged with a very high-level murder charge, which was called murder by hooliganism or with hooliganism. What they mean by that is that it was an unprovoked attack, that Jock apparently went out there with a knife wanting to kill people that night, wanting to kill Bulgarians specifically.
It became clear that alcohol was a factor at play on the night. Jock himself had had a few drinks and had a blood alcohol concentration of 0.1. But in contrast to that, the boy who was injured had a blood alcohol concentration of 0.18. And amazingly, the boy who died, Monov, had a blood alcohol concentration of 0.29.
There was a double tragedy here. There was not only Jock in prison with a serious charge, but another young man, not a dissimilar age to Jock, had also died.
When you're in prison, you don't want to be seen as being weak or emotional or things like this.
So it's actually hard for me to say. I'm trying to build up strength now as we speak to say it. I'd lie on the bed and my heart would beat and it would echo back into the pillow. And I would just think about Andrei Monov's heart stopping and trying to pump. It's just very difficult for me to. But you get the picture.
With the Monovs, I felt, I've still got you, even though.
Debatably.
Well, I can still come here and see you.
Yeah, I know.
Сега останалите новини от деня. Повече от 200 души дойдоха на погребението на 20-годишният Андрей Монов, синът на известния психолог Христо Монов.
Everybody liked him. He was very outgoing. He was a very nice person, and he was a very peaceful person. He did not fight. He did not argue.
At the funeral of Andrei Monov, a lot of members of the establishment of the then Bulgarian government, as well as of the judiciary, participated. The Minister of Interior was there. The head of the police was there.
Живот, аз съм убеден, че убийца на моя син е социопат. Той не признава ценностите на нашето общество. Той си има.
The father of the dead boy was a graduate in psychology from Sofia University. We actually studied together.
Mr. Monov, do you mind if we ask
No,
questions?
I don't.
Then he became deputy chairperson of the State Agency of Child Protection in Bulgaria. You have to be politically well-connected and personally also well-connected to get this job.
I had a rather rapid introduction to Bulgarian politics and the legal system. It was still an Eastern Bloc country in many ways. It had only been since 1989 that they'd actually divested themselves of the communist regime. In 2007, the same year that Jock was put into prison, Bulgaria joined the EU. But this was only on the understanding that the level of judicial governance was not really adequate to meet European standards, and therefore they would have to undergo reform to make sure there was progress in reducing corruption and also improving their judicial system.
Simon was struggling with the legal issues and organised a small team. Our role is limited. Simon already had employed a Bulgarian lawyer for his son.
Interpol checks were done on Jock, and it was found that he didn't have any criminal convictions or any pending charges in any of the countries that he's been in, including Australia.
We ended up having multiple trips to Bulgaria, and in the March following the events, finally we obtained the file with all the evidence for the trial, all the witness statements.
There was an argument between Andrei and some Gypsy.
The most exciting time for me was when I got the translation of one of the independent witnesses, Viktor Georgiev. As his police statement unfolded, I realised it was actually Jock's story.
The hitting lasted for about 30 to 40 seconds. It was chaotic and random.
I'm thinking, well, why haven't the police taken this up? I mean, this is Jock's story. Why are they saying that there's no proof of anything that Jock said was true?
I saw one of the boys from the group came behind the boy with a knife and throwing some kind of object on him that, as far as I can see, hit him on the head.
We also found out that there was CCTV footage that was part of the evidence. Unfortunately, we didn't actually have access to this prior to the trial.
The prosecutor has actually stated that Jock actually sought out victims to stab lethally. What I find so objectionable to that is it just flies totally in the evidence that her own experts have given her. Basically, their psychological profile of Jock is of a young man that has a strong sense of social justice, is not overly aggressive, and is able to cope with stressful situations without losing control. I do know he's a very impulsive boy. He was always the fixer, the person who came and helped.
Jock pleaded not guilty to the charge of murder with hooliganism. If the case had happened in Australia, central to his defence would have been the claim that he was acting in self-defence.
Close family members are allowed to apply and be accepted as part of the defence team. And it was, to my amazement, I suddenly found myself turned from, father and friend to a quasi-lawyer.
The Bulgarian system is inquisitorial, so they don't have juries, they have a bench of judges. Simon and Jock are at the bar table together, one after another, cross-examining some of the important witnesses.
It was extremely traumatic having the parents of the boy who died as the first two witnesses. I did doubt myself as to whether or not, in fact, I was doing the right thing for Jock.
It is hard to talk about my only child. He made our life meaningful.
He had many various circles of friends, which I should say belong to the real elite of Bulgarian youth.
The court was called to decide whose interest it takes into consideration. A family which was well-connected, or somebody who came from the other part of the world and came to help a member of an ethnic minority that is almost universally hated by society.
One after the other, members of the group changed their version of events to now say that there were no Roma people there and there was no fight with them. The defence wanted to then bring in the original statements of the group members to the police, but importantly, the parents of the dead boy worked with the prosecutor to block the defence attempts.
The time that I really noticed it and started to get very, very angry was when we were cross-examining some of the policemen. And we knew that these three policemen had already said in their signed statements that Jock had gone to the aid of a Roma, been beaten by the gang. In court, they actually denied what they had actually written in their signed statements. And of course, I was just amazed. We knew they'd changed their story. The Monovs knew they'd changed the story. When we asked the judge to adjudicate, the Monovs used their right to say, we're not going to have their police statements read out in court. Therefore, the policemen got away with it. How can we win? Hello, mister.
I'd like to say the things that everybody knows. Corruption, discrimination, racism, backwardness.
How you going?
My dad, Simon, he sits me down, no, we can't do this, we might put the court offside, da-da-da-da-da. I'll see you in March. Yeah, what comes usually? When is it? March 25th or 26th?
And all this time, I'm trying to show Jock that there is hope. We've got to go with the system. This is our big hope, that the system won't fail you.
I'll see you in March.
Be good. Don't do anything I wouldn't.
I remember the day in court when I saw the CCTV footage, and like many of those days in court, it was confusing.
The expert had a laptop, small laptop, and he showed the CCTV footage on that laptop.
And there were maybe 100 people in the room, and no one could see anything and no one could understand anything, and we were not allowed to make our own analysis. We were never given a copy of the CCTV.
I remember thinking, well, okay, this must be the kind of evidence which would throw doubt on the prosecution's case and would at least say that Jock was acting in self-defence.
And I turned around and I noticed that the court reporter, the person who's supposed to be recording this information, had left the room. None of this expert witness that the cross-examination had actually gone into the formal report. The judges, there were a panel of 5, were simply sitting on their dais up the end, not taking notes and not listening.
It was made very clear that that evidence was not at all significant. In In December 2009, we'd been through some 18 months of court hearings. It was Judgment Day, and it was a very simple statement: murder with hooliganism. And the sentence was 20 years.
When my father grabbed my shoulder, I didn't want him to do that because I didn't need it and I didn't want other people to think I did. And I shrugged him off and I said, I don't need support, you know, I don't need that. And my father said something to me which actually did ring home: it's not for you, it's for me.
I think part of my world fell in, and my faith in the Bulgarian justice system just took a huge nosedive. As far as I'm concerned, my son, Jock, is a courageous human being who did what very few of us would do in this community, which was to go to the aid of someone. And what it led to was, unfortunately, a significant tragedy.
Баща му заяви, че се гордее с него. Според мен в нравствен план той от тук нататък може да бъде заклеймен единствено и само като баща на убит, защото аз съм убеден, че сина му е продукт на семейството, в което е живял.
The Bulgarian prison conditions are terrible. The biggest problem are lack of activities, lack of work, lack of education, and just complete and total corruption.
So in 2012, he decided he would start up a union, which he called the Bulgarian Prisoners Rehabilitation Association.
They put him in isolation despite the fact that he was appealing, because that's the way the law is in Bulgaria.
I have a drive to help other prisoners, and it's the same drive that drove me to help the Roma on that night. And it's because I believe that every man or woman has a responsibility to effect progressive change wherever they are.
Many prisoners don't know what rights they have normally. And Jock goes to them and says, hey, you have this right, you can make this. And he tried to help them. But they threaten him many, many times, the guards, the administration. They give him punishment for nothing.
And they became quite vindictive and bitter. And certainly within the last 2 years, that vindictive behaviour has really escalated to the point where it was becoming intolerable for Jock.
The judges felt that Jock had been a very good prisoner, that he'd done a lot of work in terms of helping other prisoners, and that he had indeed met the requirements for serving parole.
И аз погледнах Джок и му казах, сега ще те видя да ревеш. Сега ще те видя да ревеш. Той ми каза, няма да ме видиш да ревеш. Но след малко ми каза, дръж ме, защото ми се подкосят краката и се хвана за бланката до мене. И го видях малко след това да се разрева.
And then just to have judges tell you that not only are you free, but we have so much faith and trust in you that we're even going to give you the highest type of freedom. And that was just amazing.
After the initial elation of the parole decision, I have to say things seem to unravel a bit.
The 32-year-old was escorted out of Sofia Central Prison before being whisked away to a detention centre for processing.
Very soon after, the backlash started, and the father of the boy who died, Andrei Monov, led a march.
Върна от съдебната система на тези, които позориха, които посегнаха на нашата националност, на нашата държава. Благодаря ви.
And there was also a far right-wing group that actually mounted a demonstration outside the court. And this was all against the decision for parole and demanding that it be overturned.
After Palfreeman got parole, the panel of judges was attacked by politicians, by prosecutors, even by the Supreme Judicial Council. The Prosecutor General and his partners in crime, to say, A great opportunity to use that case for political means in order to attack judicial reform.
Jock Palfreeman's parole has set off a political firestorm in Bulgaria.
I was extremely worried when I heard that Mr Monov had petitioned the Prosecutor General, who is effectively probably the most powerful person in Bulgaria, to attempt to overthrow the parole decision. And then the Prosecutor General petitioned the Supreme Court of Cassation, which is actually the highest court in the land.
Australian Jock Palfreeman could face another 2 months in an immigration detention centre while a Bulgarian court decides his fate.
Parole decisions of the Court of Appeal are final in Bulgaria. This motion is entirely unlawful.
We have no justice in Bulgaria. The prosecutor office don't follow the law. They made just political and, please excuse my French, shit show.
All this happened during the time of a local election, and there is a big fight in the society, and Jock is somehow a victim of all this.
We are not still what we want to be, a real democratic country respecting human rights and rule of law.
Consular officials arrived at the Busmansi detention centre but emerged without Palfreeman and without answers.
Does he have his passport?
You need to speak to Canberra.
We understand that this is outside Bulgaria's normal legal process, and we would be concerned, Mr President, if non-legal issues were seen to have an influence on this process.
Jock was kept in detention illegally, and with the mounting pressure against the Bulgarian government, they eventually decided to release him. But they had also declared that he could not leave the country. So now I'm just not sure where we are with Jock, because he's now in this almost impossible situation where he's been released into the community without any identity because they confiscated his passport. He's got a deportation order at the same time. He's got an illegal travel ban. I do fear for his safety.
Thanks everybody for waiting all
I just feel that there is still time for them to subvert the whole judicial system against Jock. If the Court of Cassation comes back and says, we agree with the Prosecutor General, we annul the parole decision, then Jock goes back to prison.
The fear of going back to prison is connected with the fact that this fascist party still controls the prisons, and they are very vicious, violent and corrupt. And probably, if I go back to prison, first of all, there is not a judge in Bulgaria who would give me parole again. You go back through all the choices you made, but also all the choices other people made and how they interconnect to get to some fateful point in your life. I wasn't going to allow these guys to beat this guy to death. I mean, can you imagine if they had beaten the guy to death and everyone had just been watching?
Well, what do you think we should do? Should we be getting on a plane, or should you get on a plane, or...?
Ooh, look, every day I keep saying, well, we should go over. My presence, I think, in Bulgaria could be a bit polarising.
When I watch Simon, I can just see the despair. It's a terrible thing to think that, you have almost been able to get your child out of Bulgaria, and then at the last minute, you've not been able to get your child out of Bulgaria.
I won't believe that he is free until he's back on Australian soil.
When Jock was arrested and I heard about it, I knew from the news that it would be very difficult for him to get back home. And so we decided almost immediately to keep the family together and to keep behind Jock is to put a light up on the hill overlooking the valley, which would stay there for as long as he was away, and when he came back, there it would be. The light on the hill for Jock. The light on the hill will remain.